Hello everyone! Do you think chimpanzees can speak human language?
No!
Actually, the structure of our vocal cords makes it simply impossible. However, in today's adaptation of the novel by French sci-fi writer Pierre Boulle, we'll explore the potential outcomes of genetic experiments. Will works in a lab that conducts experiments on animals to find a cure for incurable diseases. One day, scientists managed to use genetic engineering to produce surprising results.
How many moves was that?
20. The perfect score is 15. Doc, what are you giving her?
Eager to cure his father as quickly as possible, Will ignores the side effects. The monkeys on which the substance was tested become far more intelligent than expected. A group of chimps are making their way through a jungle untouched by man. Suddenly, someone startles a flock of birds, and the chimps suspect something is wrong. People emerge from all directions to lure the chimps into traps and snares, but they only manage to catch one young female. She is locked in a metal box, from where she helplessly watches her family, whom she will never see again. She is brought to America, where scientists Will and Franklin conduct experiments on her. She's given the nickname Bright Eyes. One day, she shocks everyone with her abilities by solving a puzzle way faster than expected. Will rushes off to report the breakthrough to his boss, Stephen Jacobs. A special virus has been under development for over 5 years, and it's time to test it on humans as a cure for Alzheimer's disease. The boss has yet to discuss it with the investors, and he tells Will to present the project to the board of directors.
Keep your personal emotions out of it. These people invest in results, not dreams.
Soon, the scientist is giving a presentation showing that before, Bright Eyes couldn't even understand the essence of the task. But after being exposed to a virus, she nailed it. This gene therapy activates the brain's ability to restore neural connections and increase the number of nerve cells. This is the kind of treatment that will help all those suffering from Alzheimer's disease. But while Will is pitching his idea to the board of directors, things aren't going great at the lab. They want to take Bright Eyes out for a presentation, but she refuses to come out of her cage and then attacks the scientist. Franklin calms the chimp down and tries to lure her out with her favorite soda. This attempt also fails, and the chimp rushes back into the cage. The scientist readies a tranquilizer gun, but Bright Eyes gets scared and breaks free, wreaking havoc in the lab. Meanwhile, Will, who has no idea what's happening at the lab, tells the investors that the only side effects of the substance are small green spots that appear on the chimp's eyes. At this time, Bright Eyes rushes forward and smashes everything she touches, shocking the directors. She bursts into the presentation room and gets shot down by a security guard. Will tries to stop him, but it's too late. Not wanting to deal with the frenzied monkeys anymore, the boss orders to put them all down. Franklin pleads with him, desperately asking not to be compelled to harm the animals he has grown incredibly fond of. Stephen replies that they're not running a petting zoo, but a serious corporation. Will begs him not to shut down the project, and the boss demands to go back to the drawing board. 5 years of Will's work go to waste. The frustrated scientist returns to the lab, where Franklin shows him the newborn chimp in the cage of Bright Eyes. No one noticed that she had already been brought in pregnant. She was aggressive and wouldn't come out of her cage because she just didn't want to be separated from her baby. Franklin would have taken the baby, but his relative works for the company and would immediately rat him out. So he asks Will to sneak the animal past security and take it in for a couple of days. Will refuses and says he won't risk taking company property home.
Let me tell you what, Doc. Jacobs made me put down the other 12. I'm done.
Franklin gives Will the syringe with poison and leaves. Will can't bring himself to kill the apes and brings the baby home in a box. Will shares a home with his father, Charles, who has Alzheimer's disease. While Will is away, a nurse looks after Charles. Despite his condition, Charles tries to play a melody on the piano that he once used to play without any effort. Welcoming his son with a smile, Charles mistakenly believes that Will had a chemistry test today. Will shows his dad the baby chimp, and Charles immediately becomes attached to him, calling him Caesar. At night, Will babysits the screaming baby chimp, and Caesar holds his finger. This brightens up the horrible day a bit. In the morning, the baby surprises the men by drinking from a bottle himself. Even though he's only a day old, Will notices the green specks in his eyes and keeps him to study. 3 years later, Caesar moves freely inside Will's house unsupervised. He knows sign language and can solve puzzles better than school-age kids, but he is not yet allowed outside. And Caesar often peeks at the neighbor's children through the window in his attic room. Will is writing a research paper on the virus and its effect on Caesar. And suddenly, he hears a noise in the house. Charles yells at the nurse, trying to snatch a lamp from her hands. The lamp breaks, leaving a cut on his arm. The exhausted nurse leaves, telling Will that his father needs constant care in the nursing home. That same day, Will steals several vials of the virus from work that have never been tested on humans. He injects his father before he goes to bed, and Caesar notices it. In the morning, Charles' ability to play the piano returns. Will is very excited, but is aware of the risks, and carefully checks his father's vital signs. In the meantime, Caesar watches children outside riding bicycles. He slips in through an open window and finds an abandoned bike in a neighbor's garage. The girl sees the chimp, and her father Douglas swings a bat at the intruder. Will and his father stop the neighbor in time and take Caesar away. During their escape, Caesar suffered a deep cut on his leg. Will takes Caesar to the vet at the zoo. Dr. Carolyn develops a fondness for the chimp, and Caesar playfully suggests Will take her out for lunch. Later on, Will proudly shows her the room where Caesar stays. Carolyn praises Will for taking care of Caesar, but notes that when he grows up, he will be much stronger than his owner and will hardly be able to live in the house. Carolyn admits that she both loves chimpanzees and is afraid of them. Caesar understands her words and pretends to beat Will. Everyone laughs, and later they decide to walk with Caesar in the woods. Together with Charles, they go to a nature preserve where centuries-old sequoias stand. Will leads the chimp on a leash, but soon decides to let him run free. But Caesar is in no hurry to run away and bows his head down, extending his hand towards his owner.
He's asking your permission. It's a supplicating gesture. It's okay.
After getting permission, the chimp rushes forward and climbs a huge sequoia tree. For the next 5 years, they bring Caesar here regularly so he could enjoy nature. He climbs high up, from where he can see San Francisco like the palm of his hand. Will and Carolyn fall in love, and Caesar gets a little jealous, playfully interrupting their picnic kisses. On their way back, a woman with a dog is startled by the chimp, and her dog starts barking loudly at Caesar. The chimp doesn't like this, and he scares the dog away with an aggressive grin. Will pulls on the leash and leads Caesar away, noticing the collar on himself and the dog. Caesar becomes upset. He asks Will if he is a pet, to which Will patiently explains that he is his father, not his owner. But Caesar keeps asking questions about his origins. Will takes him and Carolyn to the lab building, where he explains that Caesar was born here and that his mother died with the other chimps. The scientist also mentions the substance she was given and its effect on Charles' condition and Caesar's abilities. Carolyn is very disturbed by what she has heard, and she wants to leave. Will confesses to Carolyn that he stole the chimp to save him and did not know that he would inherit the intelligence through his mother's blood. Originally, the substance was only supposed to fix damaged brain cells, but the baby chimp had none of those in his body, and the results were unpredictable. Carolyn is concerned and wonders where this is all going. Will's primary concern is that the medication is already making a positive difference for his father and will have the potential to cure millions of others. Meanwhile, Caesar, while gazing at the birthmark on his chest in the mirror, finds himself consumed by thoughts about his origins. In the morning, Caesar is still deep in his thoughts and refuses to eat breakfast. Charles tries to cut the eggs with the wrong end of his fork, and the chimp helps him. Will sees this and finds antibodies in his father's blood that prevent the cure from working. While his son is at work, Charles loses control of his actions and leaves the house, where he sees his neighbor Douglas's car. He gets behind the wheel and hits the gas, crashing into the car in front. The neighbor sees the accident and in a rage yells at the confused man, who tries to explain that he mistook the car for his own. Caesar notices the scene and thinks Charles is in danger. He runs out of the house and pounces on Douglas, beginning to beat him. The man throws the chimp off and tries to escape, but Caesar catches up with him. Only Charles' yelling calms the enraged chimp. Caesar feels sorry he lost control and hugs Charles. The scared neighbors call the police, and the chimp is taken to a special monkey shelter. Will and Carolyn take Caesar inside. Caesar likes the large enclosure, which looks like a cool playground to him. Will is worried because Caesar has never met any other chimps, but shelter director John Langdon assures them that everything will be fine. The humans leave, and Caesar is left alone and realizes very quickly that he is locked up and will not be released. He bangs on the glass, begging Will to take him home, but until the court looks into the case, it's impossible. Will promises the weeping Caesar to return as soon as he can. Suddenly, the chimp hears Dodge, the shelter director's son, screaming that he can let Caesar out. He runs to the voice, but only ends up trapped in a small cage. After tricking him, Dodge laughs at the silly chimp. Aside from Caesar, there are dozens of primates in the shelter screaming and hitting their cages. Will is told that he won't be able to pick up Caesar until 90 days later. He begins to argue with the woman behind the counter, to which she snaps that the chimp could easily have been put to sleep. At home, Charles is also very upset by Caesar's absence. The man succumbs to the disease, forgetting who he is. The cure no longer works. Will must act decisively to get his dad back. At work, he finds his boss and reveals to him that he has been giving his father the stolen medicine all along. After hearing that in addition to beating the disease, the medicine improves memory and intelligence, Stephen gives the go-ahead for Will's new project. At the shelter, Caesar is fed with something that looks more like garbage. He refuses to touch it and splashes it on Dodge in disgust. Caesar is glad he could get back at the cruel warden, but Dodge douses him with water from the hose in return. Dodge's assistant, Rodney, asks what to do about Caesar's clothes, which make him stand out from the other chimps.
Might cause problems with the other apes.
Good.
The wardens leave, and Caesar cries, lying on the cold floor of his cage. Noticing a piece of chalk, he draws the attic window he loved to peer through back at home. Caesar leans close to it, trying to find some peace. Meanwhile, in the lab, Will and Franklin meet 10 new monkeys. One of them, nicknamed Koba, is calmer around humans than the others, and he is chosen for the first test. The new drug is administered in a gaseous form by putting a mask over the chimp's face. Koba inhales the gas, but suddenly twitches and knocks the mask off himself and Franklin. The gas fills the room, and Franklin gets a dose of the virus too. At the shelter, Caesar goes out for his first walk with the rest of the primates. He tries to play with them, but the dominant and most aggressive chimp, Rocket, rips the newcomer's shirt off and pounces on him. Caesar tries to hide from him in a tree, but the leader catches up with him and knocks him down. Dodge notices the fight and calms both apes down with tranquilizer darts. In the lab, the results quickly show that Koba's IQ has skyrocketed, and he's even able to write Stephen's last name on the chalkboard. Franklin observes that the monkey's immune system handles the virus's side effects well, but he himself starts coughing up blood. That same evening, an orangutan named Maurice communicates with Caesar using sign language. He explains that he learned it in the circus where he performed before the orphanage. Suddenly, the chimp in the next cage is put to sleep by the director and his son with a dart. They are about to send him to the company where Will works, and Caesar notices it. Maurice notes that this is not the first time this has happened, and no one has come back from there. He tells his new friend to keep his head down, because people can't stand smart monkeys. Soon, Will and Carolyn visit Caesar, and he tells them that he is very sick and in pain. They see the wounds on their friend's body, and Will lashes out at Dodge in a rage, blaming him for everything. Langdon stops the scuffle, and Will grabs a key from the wall to let Caesar out, but he's forbidden to do so until the court makes its decision. Caesar begs to take him home, but Will and Carolyn can only hold his hands through the bars. Will asks the chimp not to give up hope, and their visit is interrupted. Caesar stares at them as they leave, unable to understand why he is being treated this way. He perceives this as a betrayal, and in his anger, he erases the drawing of the window from the wall. During his time in the shared enclosure, Caesar climbs up as high as he can and looks outside through the window on the roof. He also notices that the big gorilla, named Buck, is never let out of his cage. Dodge later brings his buddies over to see the monkeys, and he puts on a show by zapping the steel cages with a stun gun. The monkeys get scared and start screaming in response to the electric shocks. While this is happening, one of the guys notices Caesar, who signals to him with a gesture. Caesar then reaches through the cage and snatches a knife from his pocket. With it, Caesar makes a lockpick at night and unlocks his cage. He warns Maurice, then opens Buck's cage and gently wakes him up. The gorilla is angry until he discovers that he is free. He happily rolls around the yard and thanks Caesar for his help. Caesar then releases Rocket and challenges him in front of the other monkeys, who are watching from their cages. Caesar knocks him down, but spares his life. Rocket sees huge Buck behind him and submits to the new leader. Will can't sleep and wants to inject his father with a new virus, but Charles silently shakes his head, refusing treatment. He takes his son by the hand, and Will falls asleep on the bed with him. In his sleep, Charles peacefully passes away. Going through his father's things after the funeral, Will finds a picture of Caesar that Charles had kept with him. Carolyn comforts him by telling him that not everything in this world can be changed. When Will enters his lab, he finds out that Stephen has been running experiments behind his back to expedite the release of a new medicine on the market. Will cautions about the potential hazards and attempts to prevent his boss from continuing. In response, Stephen threatens to terminate Will's employment. Fed up with the constant interference in his research, Will decides to resign. Franklin didn't show up at work because he's feeling worse. In a panic, he knocks on Will's house, but no one is inside. Will's neighbor Douglas comes out to the noise, and Franklin coughs blood right on him. Will puts a substantial amount of money on Langdon's desk, The director accepts the bribe and agrees to release Caesar. However, the chimp shows no eagerness to leave his cage. Will calls his friend home, but the leash in his hands becomes the last straw. Disappointed, Caesar closes the cage in front of his former owner's face. He won't leave the rest of his brothers alone.
Caesar?
I guess he likes it better here with his own kind.
Will leaves alone, and the monkeys chant in support of their new leader. At night, Caesar gets out of his cage again and teaches Rocket to share cookies with all the prisoners. Maurice asks why Caesar would do such a thing, and he explains that the monkeys need to rally together because they won't stand a chance if they're apart. Maurice replies that the monkeys are too stupid for teamwork. Caesar realizes that this is true. Then he notices Rodney typing the code on the door lock. At night, he repeats the combination and gets out through the skylight. The first thing he does is visit his home and sees Will and Carolyn sleeping together. He checks the refrigerator and finds vials of gas intended for Charles. Caesar quickly realizes what these are and rushes to the shelter to expose his brothers to the gas. In the morning, Caesar examines the primate's eyes to see if his plan worked. Langdon notices that the animals are acting very strangely, but leaves without taking any action. Meanwhile, Franklin is found dead in his home. Caesar refuses to go back to his cage after the walk, and Dodge enters the playground holding a stun gun. Rodney also aims his rifle from a safe place. The warden attacks Caesar, but he grabs his arm.
Take your stinking paw off me, you damn dirty ape!
No!
The chimp knocks Dodge out with a punch to the head and proceeds to yell no, releasing all the primates from their cages. Rodney tries to stop them, but gets beaten. Caesar stops the brothers because Rodney is the only one who hasn't mistreated him. He locks him in a cage, and then Dodge appears from around the corner. He grabs a stun gun, and Caesar douses him with a hose. The water-amplified electric shock kills Dodge. Caesar sees the tag on the missing chimp's cage and realizes that his brothers continue to suffer in the lab where his mother died. After letting Buck out, Caesar leads the monkeys to the roof, and they leave the shelter for good. At dawn, they make their way to town. Will wakes up and notices that someone has broken into Caesar's room during the night. He calls the shelter, but no one answers. Together with Carolyn, they go there and find Dodge's body in a punctured container with the virus. Rodney tells them that Caesar has learned to talk and has taken everyone with him. The police are going to handle this from now on. In San Francisco, people are shocked to see monkeys jumping across trees. They reach the lab and burst inside, freeing the test subjects, including Koba. Steven comes to work too and gets notified that Franklin died because of the virus. He sees the destruction and sees monkeys watching him from the balcony. They run away and Steven takes off in a helicopter. Caesar's pack heads for the zoo, where they also free all the monkeys. They dismantle the iron bars from the fence, making spears out of them. Steven flies over the city, ordering them to find and kill the leader of the primates. The city services try to catch chimps who have broken away from the pack, but Caesar is careful not to leave any brothers behind. The monkeys wreak havoc in the city, destroying offices and other institutions. When the police try to stop them, Maurice throws a manhole cover at their car and Buck tosses a parking meter. After climbing the cable car cabin, Caesar and his gang look out over the Golden Gate Bridge. The monkeys jump on cars in order to get to the sanctuary where Caesar spent his youth. Will and Carolyn spot them and drive to the bridge. There too, the cops ambush the monkeys, preparing to shoot them. Caesar notices this and orders his brothers to climb the supports of the bridge. Carolyn distracts the police and allows Will to slip through the cordon. The man tries to find Caesar and sees officers on horseback fighting monkeys. Huge Buck fights back and knocks the policeman off his horse. Caesar intervenes and prevents the killing, instructing everyone to continue moving ahead. The monkeys attempt to hide in the fog, but unfortunately, one of them is fatally shot by a helicopter. Maurice becomes infuriated by this. Because of the thick fog, the cops can't see the monkeys, and to stay safe from the bullets, Caesar commands the gorillas to turn the bus over and use it as a shield. Caesar then rides his horse out of the fog, leading the attack. The apes jump on the humans, knocking the machine guns out of their hands, while Maurice leads the orangutans, who attack from below. Together, they drive the humans away and celebrate their victory. Will shows up on the bridge and calls out to Caesar. They look at each other, but then a helicopter appears and opens fire. Steven specifically targets Caesar with the aim of taking him down. In response, the leader throws a chain at the helicopter, knocking over the machine gunner. But the pilot keeps firing his gun, and Buck shields Caesar with his body. The gorilla jumps onto the helicopter, toppling it onto the bridge. A series of explosions occur, and Caesar pulls his dying friend out from under the wreckage. Buck dies holding Caesar's hand. The miraculously survived Steven begs for help, but Caesar refuses to save the man and leaves. Koba pushes the helicopter off the bridge. Will gets into the police car and follows the monkeys, who run off into the woods. He calls for Caesar, but Koba spots him first and knocks him down. Caesar successfully stops the aggressive chimp in its tracks and assertively commands it to back off, compelling Koba to retreat. He gives his hand to Will, who apologizes and promises to protect Caesar if he stops the destruction and returns home. Caesar hugs Will. Will is taken aback when he hears Caesar talking.
Caesar is home.
But he quickly embraces him in his new role. If he really is an adoptive father and not the owner of the chimp, he should be happy for his son, who has finally found his place. Will approves of Caesar's decision, who returns to the pack standing in front of his favorite sequoia. He climbs to the top and looks at the city. Later, Will's neighbor Douglas arrives at the airport, where he works as a pilot. His nose is bleeding. The man is unaware of the virus he contracted from Franklin, and that it will soon spread around the world. In order to make Caesar look realistic, his behavior was modeled after sign language trained test monkeys, while his facial expressions were expertly conveyed by an actor known for his role in The Lord of the Rings. Can you guess who that was? There are plenty of hidden symbols in the movie. For example, when the monkeys make their escape from the shelter by climbing a tree, they unintentionally create a silhouette resembling a spiral DNA structure. Additionally, there's a scene where Caesar strikes a pose similar to the statue of the Thinker, and his name was inspired by the famous Roman emperor. As always, check out the name of the movie in the description. In the meantime, tell us in the comments, how do you feel about experiments on animals that allow humans to create new medicine? And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to see even more cool recaps.